Kråkan, also known as Corvus Cornix, so welcome to Class Movie Roundbus, where I talk about old movies that I found in my closet while cleaning. This week's movie is Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time, and it was made in 2010, and it's about 1 hour and 55 minutes long. And the movie starts with the sun rising over the desert and the narrator explaining some plot, and then cutting to a young street rat named Dustin, and he's the main character of the movie. And he or his friend steals something and is about to get caught. And the king, recognizing him something great, so Dustin gets to become a prince of Persia, basically. And cutting to 15 years later, where he is in a brawl scene and he gets called into a war meeting on what to do. So they are supposed to attack this town of Alamut because they believe there are weapon forgers there for some reason. So there's a discussion between the brothers and their uncle and whatnot on what to do. So they decide to attack at dawn because of the weapon forgers and whatnot. But there is some friendly competition between the brothers, Garciv and Dustin. Garciv is this kind of guy that always goes for the sword first, and Dustin is more of a sneaky kind of thief because of where he comes from and grow up. And Tuss is more of a military leader, kind of is gonna be the king after his father passes away. And then cutting to Alamut, where the princess of Alamut, Tamina, is getting body painted because there's some sacred ritual going on, and she goes out at the balcony and she sees the troops rallying up to invade her beloved city. And then Dustin Dustin sneaks into the Alamut with his band of thieves and thugs, and they get detected and they have to fight, and they manage to open the door for the other troops to arrive. So what happens is that the battle is finished, and there's a discussion with the Tamina about peace, and that's the whole kind of thing about this. They take over the town, and the thing about this is that their father gets furious because Alamut is a holy city for many reasons, and just invading it because of a claim that there might be weapon forgers there is kind of bold because they haven't found any of them. So the father, the king, he kind of betroths Dustin with Tamina because they had to there's like this old thing about kingdoms and whatnot. They kind of they are bound by blood, so to speak. So royalty marriage to royalty strengthens the bond between the kingdoms. And the king in this scene is brilliant. He's obviously drunk, and they're having this victory party, and he's kind of disappointed at Tuss, his oldest son, and he asks him to find these weapon forgers. That's the whole point. So he goes away and do that. And Dustin got a present from Tuss. It was a garment of Alamut, this beautiful robe, and the king gets it as a gift from Dustin, and it puts on the king, and for some reason it starts to burn him, and the robe is poisoned, and Dustin gets blamed for the murder of the king because the king dies from this, and Dustin is forced to flee, and he flees out with Tamina on a horse, and he lets the other horses free, and so he can escape in the confusion. And then him and Tamina talk a bit, and while they're talked for a bit, Tamina attacks Dustin with a sword, and Dustin activates the dagger of time by mistake, and he's confused by this, and he lets go of the button, and the flow of time goes back to normal, and he gets cut over the chest with a sword, and he reverses the time flow again, and he blocks Tamina's attack and asks what's going on. And back at Alamut, Tuss has become the new king because the old king is dead now. And what happens is Dustin basically takes Tamina with him on his trip, on his journey. And the other brother of Dustin, half brother of Dustin, Garciv, is on the hunt for him because he killed his father basically. So Dustin explains to Tamina that he wasn't always a prince, and he basically grew up in a gutter, and the king took him in under his wing because he had potential. And then Tamina fakes that she faints, and what happens is Dustin gets picked up by these raiders, these bad guys, and he negotiates with them off camera that they can have Tamina basically as a slave. And I thought that was kind of funny because they don't like each other at all, and Dastan is on his redemption arc right now, so he is not a good person at all. He's kind of this young brat, but he will learn how to be a king and a prince someday. That's what the story is about, I guess. So the guy that actually negotiated with Dastan, he is a sheik or like a sheikh or something, and he has this illegal ostrich race. And I thought it was a funny scene because they have these stories about the Valley of Thieves or whatever it was called, and the Valley of Slaves. And they just to keep the taxpayers away. And I thought it was super stupid. He has this illegal ostrich race. There's no like bad. There's no like cutthroats and whatnot. They just put up skeletons that he bought from a gypsy or something, and I thought that was funny. So Tamina basically gets dressed in skimpy clothing, and she kind of acts as crowd control. She basically gives beer and wine to the guests that watch the race, and she creates a diversion. And Dastan steals the dagger, and all the ostriches kind of go running all over the place. And the dagger is stolen. Dastan takes the dagger, as I said, and they escape. They're kind of fleeing again, and even later they get into the city disguised because Dastan has to leave a message for his uncle and telling him basically face to face what's going on. So he does some more parkour, and he winds up in his father's hearse, where his father's body is on this wagon, and he makes a little note from with charcoal and paper, and he puts it into his uncle's pocket. And the uncle reads this, and they meet up in a secluded place where he basically explains that this is not how it seems, and how I didn't kill the father. You gotta believe me. And he basically is trying to show his uncle Nizam the dagger of time, and his uncle gets really excited about this because now we realize that he might not be a good person after all. And Dastan kind of shows this thing, but I think it's like a nutcracker or something, because Tamina kind of switched out the dagger from something other like metallical item. And what happens is that Nizam basically is the bad guy he wants his brother, the king, dead from the beginning. So the guards attacks him because he's believed to be the king killer, the king slayer. So Dastan is forced to run, and basically that's what happened. He tries to escape. So Dastan flees, and he does some more parkour, and he's forced to fight his brother Garsev, and he goes up to the rooftops, and he's forced to fight Garsev again and defeats him. And then later, Nassim is the uncle, the bad uncle, is lying to Tuz about what Dastan has done. And uncle even later goes to the assassin, the Hassansin, to recruit them to kill Dastan, basically. And Dastan finds Tamina out in the desert, and there is a sandstorm, and they take cover. And Tamina explains about the sands of time and how everything works. And then Dastan realized why the uncle wants the dagger and everything, because if he had the dagger and went to this place called the Hourglass, the Sand of Time, he can basically reverse the time into a previous state. Because when Nassim and the king was young, Nassim saved him from a tiger or a lion, and if he hadn't have done that, he would have been king. So he wants to go back in time and kind of do that deed, or do nothing, I guess. That will be a much more better explanation. But the only one who will have a memory of what's actually happened is the one that uses the dagger. The others don't know of the events leading up or going back. It's this kind of the way that time works, I guess. So what happens is that Tamina and Dastan goes to an oasis to get some water, and they get captured by the ostrich guy, the sheik, and it's kind of a funny scene because he has only one ostrich left, and he can't make an ostrich rage with just one ostrich. And I thought that was funny. And he says like, well, do you know that ostriches have suicidal tendencies? You see it shaking, and it's just kind of a funny yet sad scene because he's not an honest person at all. But Tamina makes a deal with him that he can have a bucket of gold or something, and he goes along. So the whole idea of this crusade is for Tamina to get to the there is this like place where they can hide the dagger for some reason for the enemy or whatever. So in the middle of the night, they get attacked by the Hassansins, and they use the Hassansins are these kind of shadow warriors, assassins, basically. That's what the word comes from Old Arabic. And they use snakes, poisonous snakes, to attack them. And Dastan gets the dagger of time, and he uses it to reverse the time, because Tamina had a little more sand in her pendant, like a backup, I guess. And he gets attacked by the snakes, but he kind of memorized the pattern, so he takes out all the snakes, and they travel to the sacred place. But once they arrive there, the whole village had been assassinated by the assassins, and sooner after that, Garsiv catches up with him, and they actually talk it out, and he explains what's happening, and he actually believes that his uncle is the bad guy. But then Garsiv gets hit by like a dart to the chest, and he falls down. And then there is some fighting between the raiders, the assassins, and Dastan, and all these individuals. And what happens is that the assassins kind of get the dagger, and there's this weird scene where a snake kind of eats the dagger, and it crawls back into like the sleeve of one of the bad guys, and that's what they came there for, to take the dagger, possibly kill Dastan. But anyway, Garsiv saves Dastan, and then he dies, and the assassins are off. But now they have to go into the city to kind of find, to basically take back the dagger and save the day, because if the brother of the king, the uncle, gets the knife, that will mean the end of everything, and no one will ever remember all this bad stuff coming up to this point. Something like that, I guess. So they enter the city to try to stop Nassim, and there's this one character that follows along the sheik that is from a tribe called the Mbaka, and they're famous for their knife throwing skills. So in this tower, this sacred tower, they have put the dagger of time for some reason, maybe as of bait or something, or just to keeping it safe. But it's guarded by an assassin with equally good knife throwing skills. So they duke it out, and the Mbaka kills off the assassin, but he's mortally wounded as well, and he throws the dagger down to Dastan so he can take it. So now they have to get to the sands of time, the hourglass, before Nassim does. And Dastan is confronted his brother Tus about the whole thing, about the lying of his brother or his uncle Nassim and everything. And he explains about the dagger of time. And he says that the button on the hilt reverses the time. And then he stabs himself through the chest. And then the Nassim walks in and thus pushes the button on the hilt or whatever, and time is reversed. And he understands how and everything works. And he believes Dastan's work. But then Nassim walks in again, as I previously said, when time is reversed and then going back. And Nassim kills Thus. And then he steals the dagger from Dastan, and basically what happens is that Tamim does a distraction, and Nassim goes into the chamber, because they found like shaft that leads down to the hourglass. It's basically under the city. But Tamina knows a secret way into the chamber, because there is a secret way. And there's like this path you have to walk on, but if you go outside the path, you kind of fall down this pit, and of course there's a rock that falls on the side, and the traps are triggered, and Tamina makes it across like a gorge, and Dastan falls down this CG animated sand dune kind of thing, and he makes like a backflip or something, and he kind of survives, and he gets into the chamber as well. So Tamina and her they meet up at this junction. They go together to stop Nassim from stabbing the dagger of time into the hourglass. So there's this fighting scene between them, and what happens is there's some cliff falling apart. There's this situation where Nassim pushes Tamina over the edge, and Dastan is forced to hold her, but she says, like, if you get the dagger, this will never happen, and she lets go, and she falls down into the dark abyss. and Dustin is forced to fight his brother, and they open the hilt and they have this battle, and all of a sudden he is transported back in time to where they have newly conquered Alamuth, and he confronts his brothers and all the other guys there that this is wrong, we should not have invaded this whole city, we have done a very bad deed. And Nassim basically tries to talk down the crowd, but it's not working in his favor, and he attacks Dustin, and Dustin defends himself, and the uncle falls down on the ground, and he says like there's no honor in you or something, and then the uncle tries to stab him with a knife, but then Tuss basically kills the uncle, and that ends that kind of chapter. And then they're forced to talk to Tamina again, but this time it's different because he invaded the city, but he had remorse and everything, and he talks to Tamina about it, and then Tuss says like maybe you should strengthen the bond between our kingdoms with a marriage. What do you think about that, Dustin? And it's like this funny scene. They just kind of reverse a little bit pieces, but the end result is kind of the same. And Dustin is more of a humble character at this point, so he says like, yes, well, it would be appropriate not to be wedded without a gift. So he hands her own the dagger of time basically, and they walk out and they talk, and of course he's been through all this kind of adventure, and but no one else remembers but him because he went back in time with the dagger and everything. So so they're about to get married and everything, and there's like this heartwarming scene, and that's the end of the movie. And the sun sets, and it's like the movie can start again, I guess. So what do I think about this movie, this The Sands of Time? It's a Disney movie, and it could have been an awesome movie in my opinion. Every time when like a big budget company tries to make a movie out of a video game, you have high hopes, but you always know that they're gonna screw up some parts of it. So all of the time they have some reference throughout the movie, like the character Dustin does these moves that he does in the video game. He can run on walls, and he does parkour, obviously, just as the original video game. But I can't really recommend this movie. It's one of those movies where it's like, I forgot even I had it in the bookshelf. I was like, well, I remember the game, so that's why I bought the movie. And then I forgot about the movie because it was too bad, but I remember the game. So my recommendation is play the game and forget this movie. Leave it in the Sands of Time. That was the worst crossover I ever made. But yeah, anyway, thanks for listening and watching, and take care.